Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the third episode of Round the Table with Karandas. I'm your host Zainab Said and thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about a very important issue, and I think one of the major sort of obstacles that Karandas was actually created to address, which was access to finance for SMEs. So Karandas has done a wide variety of work, through different mechanisms, whether it's finance, market-based finance, whether it's concessional finance, or whether it is creating entities in the financial ecosystem that can actually address gaps for SMEs. Today, I'm very honored to have with me two gentlemen who will be talking about a specific entity that was set up by Karandas to address the issues in the financial ecosystem when it comes to access to finance for SMEs. I'm very honored to have with me today Mr. Javed Iqbal, who is the CEO of Parvaz Financial Services, and of course our very own Mr. Naveed Kuraya, who is the Chief Investment Officer of Karandas. Thank you so much to both of you for being here and helping us learn the basics also and the more nuanced parts of how SME financing is different and what is happening via PFSL for integrating easier access to finance for SMEs. So I'll start with you, Naveed. And my first question really is, and of course, Javed Saab, if you want to contribute to this because you've been in this field for a very long time also, what is really the market gap that you think Karandas is addressing, or why did Karandas think that having a specialized institution like Parvaz Financial Services, was important for addressing the SME gap, SME finance gap?
Zainab, first of all, thank you for having me. Karandas established Parvaz Financial Institution as a dedicated financial institution for funding SMEs for several reasons. First of all, for several years, Karandas, and its mandate, of course, as you know, is to enable or create a marketplace for SME financing, which is a big gap. Karandas experimented with various solutions. One of the key solutions that it experimented with was to partner with commercial banks and see how they react to innovative products and lending to the small and medium enterprises. We saw that the needle moved, but not a lot. The overall lending to SMEs was flat on a banking sector basis, and also the percentage of lending to private sector stayed higher than what the lending was to small and medium enterprise, which was the second reason that if you look at the regional lending to SMEs, in other countries in the region, the SME lending by banks is around 20% of private capital, whereas we are around 7% of that. The third reason I would say is that the banks perceive SMEs as higher risk. When they've got choices of lending to the government and to the corporates, they would not really focus on small and medium, which they perceive to be high risk, which is actually not true. If you create structured products, then SMEs are not as risky. So for several of these reasons, we decided that we need to establish, for a demonstration basis, a financial institution that's dedicated to SMEs, which doesn't exist in the country. Hence, Parvaz Financial Institution, which we as sponsors own 100% at this time. We've capitalized it at 3 billion rupees. And Javed, of course, leads it. And we've had good solutions or good products and good outcomes out of it to date. So let's see how this experiment proceeds.
Great, thanks. So, just for our viewers, just a bit of an intro on the PFSL, which, some of you may not know. So the PFSL, the Parvaz Financial Services Limited, was set up in 2021. To date, it's worked directly and indirectly in, giving access to finance to over 700 SMEs. It has taken out loans for over 3.5 billion rupees, and currently the outstanding portfolio is 2 billion. So, so the impact that, the experiment that Karandas started and the impact that they're trying to see, of course, is going to massify over the years. But in these short 2 years where, they've been working on operationalizing, they've been working on operationalizing the company, they've been working on sort of putting together how to, do the credit policy, how to do credit, hiring and all of that. So despite, all of those things, this seems to be a very, very good start to the SME portfolio for this specialized organization. So thank you so much again, Javed Saab, for being with us. I think my main question to you, and I know you come from the banking sector, is, how do you feel SME lending, or how do you feel lending to SMEs is different from lending to the other entities in the private sector, large-scale industries, for example?
Okay, thank you very much, Zainab, for inviting me for this discussion on a very, very important subject. We have been hearing out from all the quarters that how important these SMEs are, but unfortunately, there has been very little that is done by the regulators, by the banks, uh, and I mean, the gap still remains there. We keep calculating the number of SMEs on different models at some point in time. The last published report, that's about 15 years ago,
Yeah, I
it
was
says
hearing.
it says about 3.2 million SMEs. Karandas conducted a very special their own proprietary report, and we have estimated that it's over 5 million SMEs in the market. But if you ask me, I have been practicing this SME lending for about 20 years, as you mentioned, in the banks. Uh, the total number of SMEs are even much larger than this. And Naveed Sab just rightly mentioned that only less than 200,000 SMEs are being addressed by the formal financial sector. Yes, rest of the people do get money, but from the informal channel. So the Parvaz has actually been established, and from very day one, uh, we are trying to address things very, very differently. The key challenges that these SMEs have from the formal banking sector is that typically the commercial banker or the conventional banker would ask the same type of paperwork and the same type of information that we will go and ask to a large commercial customer or to a corporate customer. So the same cookie cutter doesn't work everywhere. These people do not have that sophistication to kind of address the questions that these bankers ask. So they really shy away and they go back to the informal market. So what Pravaz is doing is that I always had this thing in mind that someday some people will do differently, and now Karandas has arranged or created that platform through Parvaz Financial Services, where we are able to do things differently. We have taken up, as you rightly mentioned, all the capacity in terms of organizational standpoint view is in place. Our automated loan management systems are in place. We have also partnered with different technology partners to use the data to arrive at the credit scoring model. That is one of the, globally this is being used, but unfortunately, Pakistan में ये बहुत ज़्यादा एक्टिव नहीं है. And इस डेटा को यूज़ करते हुए we can actually arrive on a positive or a eligible SME who is able to get the loan, and then subsequently आप उससे बहुत ही मुख्तसर से डॉक्यूमेंटेशन करा के और उसको ये लोन दे सकते हैं. So we have now started that. Our first project or the first product that is catered to address this particular issue, जिसमें आइडियली एक SME को शायद उतना ही टाइम लगेगा जितना उसको एक किसी थर्ड पार्टी प्राइवेट लोन प्रोवाइडर के पास जाता है, बिकॉज इन लोगों को कुछ बेसिक इन्फॉर्मेशन द डिसीजन विड बी डन थ्रू अ क्रेडिट स्कोरिंग मॉडल. उस पर वो टाइम नहीं लगेगा. हम उनसे को बहुत ज़्यादा कागजात नहीं मांगते जैसे कि formal balance sheet and stuff. Obviously, there are few challenges from the regulator, but regulators are very welcoming to the ideas, and hopefully in the times to come इस तरह की चीज़ें भी नहीं होंगी. And probably फिर लोग एक ऐप पे अप्लाई करेंगे लोन को और उनको अगले कुछ मिनट्स के बाद एक डिसीजन मिलके एंड शायद पैसे भी उनके अकाउंट में क्रेडिट हो जाएंगे. दैट इज़ what Parvaz is aiming. So hence we are investing a lot in technology and the partners. So this is the very different, as you asked me कि जी हम क्या करेंगे, तो हम इस different modus operandi से जाते हुए लोगों को ये कर्ज़े बहुत जल्द कुछ मिनटों में, जिसको आइडियली हमने अभी अपनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अंदर इसका एक मोटिव 3 मिनट का रखा है. लेट्स सी, इट्स नॉट, we are not there yet, but yes, we
That's
will be
the aspiration,
there.
though. Okay,
So
great.
that's fine.
I mean, I'll circle back to a really interesting kind of cartoon that I once saw. जिसमें एक बैंक मैनेजर बैठा हुआ है, you can see with the suit and the tie, and एक SME owner बैठा हुआ है, and ऊपर speech bubble है जिसपे SME owner कह रहा है, so you want me to prove to you that I don't need a loan to get a loan from you, right? And that's
Yeah.
really been the issue of SME finance, because SMEs are different. SMEs are, very different from large corporates. They're very different from even smaller corporates. And, the kind of documentation, जैसे आपने mention किया, or the kind of, due diligence जो हम used to हैं as the banking sector to do for corporates, those don't apply to SMEs. So technology, of course, is a big driver, and I think technology has generally been a big driver for financial inclusion, whether even if you look at the micro segment. So are there also any partnerships, Naveed, that you are doing in terms of, fintech is a big thing now. So are there any partnerships on the fintech side that you're doing, since we are talking about technology?
Yeah, one of the objectives of reducing the manner in which we can reduce the time and bring more accuracy to the credit approval process of SMEs is through the fintech revolution. SMEs are notorious for lack of transparent information, and that's a fact. It's all over the world. So what have the other countries done? And let's learn from that example and then apply it here as well. What is great is that there is digitization of the transaction flow of SMEs that is happening, because both the vendors and the buyers, which are typically multinationals, require them to link to their ERPs. So when you do that, there is transaction transparency. And when you add that up, then the banks or finance institutions can assess the trade volume that is being transacted. Fintechs have seen that as an opportunity to create data that they can sell to financial institutions like Parvaz or commercial banks and give them an assessment of the risk or the transaction flow that is happening. And as a result, the banks and institutions like Parvaz can take advantage of it. Now, Parvaz's longer-term direction to incorporate digital solutions in its DNA is there. Over a long-term basis, it will be directing itself towards digitization of its loans. But in the interim, strategic partners have been brought on board. And these are supply chain finance partners on both sides, vendors and that. And we see that they're eager because we are a funder. They are eager because they get transaction flow fees. And on the other hand, SMEs are eager because they get funding, which they did not have before. So it's a very good combination of the three parties, and we are looking to.
It's a win-win-win, right, on all sides.
It's a win-win-win. Yeah. It's both meets our digitization goals. It is revenue enhancing for us with lower risk, and it's ready finance with very short timelines for the SMEs.
Yeah. And I think also in terms of the broader Karanda's sort of ambit, right? It works well because there's a lot of work that Karanda's is also doing on digitalization,
Correct.
from the other verticals. So
Correct.
I think it's a good kind of,
synergy.
Synergy in that sense. So great.
And I would just like to add here that while we do say that these SMEs lack sophisticated data or the sophisticated documentation that typically the banks want, but if you look at the large corporates, they have a very rich data on their suppliers and their dealer network and everything. That gives you the vintage of those SMEs, that gives you the actual transactions on a daily, monthly basis that these people have been carrying out. And that's, I think, very, very rich data. When you apply the technology platforms, you get, I think, much better results in terms of your due diligence based on that data. Obviously, it's not 100%
accurate.
data. No, that particular data is very accurate.
Oh, okay.
But it doesn't help you to create a 100% financial
profile or model,
or the balance sheets of these companies. But then you have to use certain proxies to arrive at your decision. So this proxy and the original data-driven model is the way to go, as I look at it.
And I think the more the data that comes in, the more statistically, relevant your results are for the credit scorecarding also that aap log kar rahe hain. And I'm sure others are also trying to do this.
If I was to just put a perspective to it so that people can understand that what we're talking about, just one large multinational has several dozen major suppliers. Under that, there are distributors that are in several hundreds, and then below that, there are retailers that go into tens of thousands. So if you look at the underlying supply chain and the impact you can create for funding, this is just one multinational that's creating this value or the transaction flow of a few hundred billion every year. So you add up the various multinationals, you're talking of trillion plus rupees. So the potential is there of that valuable data being created by fintechs, and then us utilizing it as the first mover.
Yeah. So one, obviously, as a we have to showcase various products and everything. So based on a similar concept that Navi Sab has just mentioned, we have created a product and we have onboarded a tech company. We have one such large national company who is providing us the distributor data, and then a distributor to retailer payments that are being managed by that fintech company will help us to arrive at a scorecard and then fund all those retailer. So I think this is a unique kind of experiment जो हम अभी करना हमने शुरू कर दिया. इसके अंदर कुछ first loan भी disbursements have started. So I think in 6 months we're going to get some results on.
We have to
such
get you
type
back
of-
in 6 months
Yeah,
just
sure.
to talk
I'll
about this. Actually, great. So, I mean, I think in terms of supply chain finance, of course, that was also not being addressed by the market in terms of SMEs. So that's one sort of, big segment that PFSL is looking at. But there are two other segments that have within the SME segment itself that have a clear that have a clear finance gap. So one is gendered enterprises, so enterprises run by women. And then, of course, there is enterprises that are green or are working towards climate change. So, I mean, could you tell us a bit about what PFSL is doing or is planning to do on both of these sort of facets? So we can start with climate and then go on to gender.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I think very important topic to be discussed, gender in particular. So Zainab, we have obviously this very special agenda of gender with us, and that be in terms of our staff, in terms of our clientele, and the requirement in the market. So what we have done is that we have sort of, a partnership with our parent entity, where we are providing very, very specialized in terms of rate of interest and everything facilities for the gender. And when I say specialized means, in today's market, when the policy rates are in the 20s and the 22s, these women enterprise get loan through Parvaz Financial Services, obviously supported by Karandaz's program, as less than as 5 to 6%. So it's all single digit book, and we have also to date extended roughly about 400 million rupees of loan to the women enterprise. That's about 20% of our own book size and a subsidize. So I must thank this, and this is going to be continuously initially subsidized as well as the commercial. We have also extended some commercial loans to the entities who are very well established now, but especially for the startups of the women entrepreneurs. So these subsidized facilities are available from Parvaz to these women enterprise. And so coming back to your other product, that's the green financing. Parvaz is making is already offering specialized product in that area as well, primarily into the renewable energy and the green energy. So we have extended various solar programs to the SMEs as well as to very small entrepreneurs in women. And now we are working with one of the partner, as mentioned earlier, who is a large entity and who has a very rich data on farmers, that we will be extending facilities to arrange some solar tube wells.
Oh, wow.
Because in these days, energy cost is already very high, and we see a lot of load sheddings, especially in the remote areas. So these kind of things going to help these farmers timely water their crops and get the desired yields. So that book is also, again, as I mentioned, that 20% is about women entrepreneur. Another 20-25% our book is already in the green energy. And we are working on some special kind of instrument as well. That I think we will talk in some other program later.
This is the 6 months baad wala podcast.
Maybe,
Huh?
maybe, yeah.
Great.
I
Nimit,
think
you want to
that-
add something?
The climate is such an important area for this country. It's got regulatory support. The policies require the country to reduce the carbon footprint. Secondly, from a large corporate perspective as well, they need to reduce the carbon footprint because in case there are importers in other countries, they require them in their supply chain to do that. And when you go further down, their own suppliers, which are the small and medium enterprises, then need them for two reasons. One, they need to reduce their costs. And B, they need to then give that benefit to the exporter or the larger corporate. And in that, there are multiple kinds. Solar is just one of them. We've seen substantial investment going in biomass, and that reduces the footprint even lower. So, there is an opportunity which, as Javed Saab mentioned, which is along the chain. We, as parent of Parvaz Financial Services, are creating those products where our synergies come in play, and we can provide this solution to the entire customer base that we have across the various spectrum, which is currently working with us.
So I think one of the other questions that I sort of have is that I know that PFSL is headquartered out of Lahore, and I think with our conversation on technology, this is a question that I'll still ask. But what is PFSL looking at in terms of its geographic outreach? Because generally what we've seen is that SME finance has been very brick and mortar, and that where you have the institution, where you have a branch, that's where SMEs are being funded. So right now, could you tell us a bit about the geographic sort of split in terms of the portfolio that you have, and then how do you see it going from now in the future? And I know that the company is only 2 years old, so 3 years old, so where this is early times, but I'm just looking at it, especially, I mean, this question is especially, I think, coming to my mind, where if you're working with fintechs and you're already kind of leveraging on the supply chain models of a larger MNCs or FMCGs, so उसके अंदर आपको क्या लगता है कि आप लोगों की अभी थोड़ा सा बता दें क्या है geographic kind of spread, and how do you see that in the future?
Yeah, so today we obviously based at Lahore, and for
Best
two
city in
and
the
a half
world.
years. Yeah, well, Islamabad people say it's Islamabad. So we are only in Lahore these days, and you rightly mentioned that we have a different kind of approach to handling the SME problems, and that's through technology. And when we partner with a large corporate or any fintech, whatever the data-based decision that we take, we definitely ourselves don't need to be present through a branch. And as you said, somebody wearing a tie in that branch, because that doesn't serve the purpose. It rather adds to the cost only. So initially, we will remain there. But going forward, as we grow, we will be opening more branches in different geographies. Even while sitting in Lahore, today our portfolio is across almost all Punjab and to an extent into interior Sindh. And we are also proud to report that we have some loans in GB as well, where hardly the routine commercial bank who are sitting there, they would probably have fewer, but we also have there. So having said that, today we are available and the facilities are available to the SMEs across Pakistan. But we will be going to the true SME hubs that we call, that's Gujranwala, Faisalabad, and to the places in interior Sindh. We will be opening our branches in time to come.
There's also the sectoral approach. If you look at the agriculture sector, strategic objectives of the parent are to provide additional financing to the agriculture space. Over there, you've got the rice sector, you've got the sugar sector, and each of these contribute a lot to the employment. And of course, they're credit starved as well. In addition, climate we spoke about. Education is another one where there's a lot of lack of capital. and Parvaz is making inroads in that. It's one of the strategic objectives as far as sectoral approach is concerned. And of course, technology supporting them in other ways. So there is that element of also addressing the sectors that are currently underfunded, in addition to geography.
One of the things, Joe, we've seen across the world, and I think this is not a Pakistan-specific phenomena, is that a lot of the SMEs go to informal sort of debt. Whether it's debt from friends and family or whether it's debt from a non-specialized kind of institution. So they don't go to the banks. A lot of people in Pakistan, for example, take personal loans in their own names, for SME finance. What do you guys think? Why is this the case? I mean, is it because of all of the issues that we talked about in terms of the due diligence? Yeah, आपके ख्याल से,
Yeah, so of course that is the main issue. That we are happy as a conventional banker, we are happy to lend somebody who is performing well. I think because of the capacity issues at the HR side, we are not tuned to take those risks, and we also generally look at the some kind of performance in the past. So most of the SMEs as a startup, they would definitely have ideas, and if they do not have capital, they would go to the family, friends, and definitely to the informal sector, who probably has better information on that particular sector or the product or the business that entrepreneur is taking up. We banker have information on each and everything, but that's very limited. So that is the primary reason. And I think another reason that generally banks lack and SMEs need a lot of help in that is that whenever we have some information, a better information, we take a decision. But in most of these startups and these SMEs, they themselves do not have a capacity to project their things the way we want it. And also generally in countries like Pakistan, the aftershocks of your own plan and vision things add a lot more to your problems. As a banker, whenever we extend a loan and then we want that particular loan to be performed the way it has been decided a couple of years ago. And we don't generally take into account the problems that these SMEs face, be it the policies at a macroeconomic level, the government level, taxations, interest rate, put everything in there. And typically, your entire projections, they go haywire. The benefit that these entrepreneurs have with the informal sector is that they're willing to listen to them and they're willing to reconsider their request in terms of payments or maybe the additional amount that is needed, and that's critical to sort of, roll out the investment that has been made. To me, that is a major problem at a formal banking sector. The day we see some issue with a particular credit, we sit on the table and we ask the entrepreneur to at least pay us back something, who is already struggling to run the business. Forget about the repayment and anything. He needs more money to run that business, that he himself, all of his equity is in place. Some of the formal or the informal debt is also already in that particular business. And then most of these SMEs or the startups die because of these problems.
So bridge finance is not available.
So banks do not, the conventional, I should not say only the banks, that includes the NBFCs as well. So हम सब उनकी बात सुनने के लिए तैयार नहीं होते. उनको कोई टाइम गैप, कोई उनकी फ्लेक्सिबल रीपेमेंट्स एंड उनको डिस्कशंस उनके साथ करके उनको कुछ मॉरिटोरियम दे दें, या अगर उस वक्त उनको और मज़ीद पैसे चाहिए तो हम उनको मज़ीद पैसे भी देने चाहिए. टू मी एट दैट पॉइंट इन टाइम कि अगर आपके 100 रुपये लगे हुए एंड यू नीड ओनली 10 more rupees टू रोल बिजनेस आउट, तो आई थिंक एट दैट पॉइंट इन टाइम generally bankers like me, हम उसमें help out नहीं करते, so they go to the
But that's
informal
changing
sector.
now, right, with PFSL?
Of course, at PFSL we will definitely change it, but we're talking about the industry. PFSL is only a very small player, but we will definitely showcase such examples which we want the people to follow.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what you were saying, कि demonstration effect भी बहुत ज़रूरी होता है with SMEs, with gender, with climate, right? So, you know, once you do this and it works, then it's an example that others can follow. So I think that's a very important part of it. So what you're essentially saying is that the product doesn't really match the flexibilities that the SMEs kind of require. That's the general standard job के products हैं. And also, I mean, the last 2-3 years have been shock after shock, right?
Yeah.
Macroeconomic. Now we've had the budget and all also, and I think that's
Yeah.
going to impact SMEs. Of course, it's impacting everybody, but it's also impacting
Yeah.
SMEs in terms of the super tax and things like that. So all of those things, you know, you can't even preempt a lot of these things. So there's some sensitivity analyses that we can do, you know, back in 2019 हमने किया और अब but you know things kind of have been, so it's very volatile, and so what you really need from a financial institution as an SME is कि वो आपकी बात सुने और उसके पास लचक भी हो कि वो flexibility ला सके, और उसके अलावा उसके पास understanding भी हो कि अच्छा ये entrepreneur जो है इसको इस bridge finance के साथ या इस additional finance के साथ वापस इसकी going concern बन सकती है, वापस इसकी profitability आ सकती है. So I guess understanding the SME is the key.
हाँ ज़ैनब, इसमें आपने सही कहा. At the parent level, Karandas, which is what I represent, we have a private equity portfolio as well. तो जब हम equity investments में हमने SMEs में की हुई हैं, तो our SMEs, of which we are part owners, they've been under stress for the last 2-3 years, not because of their own doing, but because of the market environment. And as Javed said, the banks, instead of supporting, have been walking up to them and saying, give us a little bit of our loan back so that we know you are, as you said, you don't need our money. So to demonstrate. So as a result, these SME owners have been disposing of assets, and we found that our role as a private equity investor, as at the parent level, has been that we provide them additional support. So where the banks should have stepped up, it is the equity providers, the owners who are coming in. So there is clearly a need for mezzanine finance products, more sophisticated products at the banking level as well to come in. Perhaps that's a different topic, but investment banks don't exist in Pakistan, and they can also come in. But Parvaz is clearly playing a role in that particular space.
Great. So we are talking about macroeconomics and things outside, and so there's some things that are not in our control, you know, like for example, COVID happened. That wasn't in anyone's control. It wasn't under no government's control for sure. But if we look at SME finance and SMEs from a regulatory perspective, especially in Pakistan, you know, what could be some of the more beneficial things that the policy, policy changes or the जो regulator कर सकता है to, you know, enable higher access to finance for SMEs or support SMEs in any way. So क्या चीज़ें हैं जो policy level पे हो सकती हैं to enhance access to finance for SMEs and just generally support their growth?
So, there have been several false starts and several attempts at the regulatory level, policy level, such as there have been targets given to banks, commercial finance institutions to lend more to SMEs. And under that, the objective was to raise the number of SMEs financed from the close to 200,000 that we have to at least 500,000 in a very short amount of time. That hasn't happened. So and perhaps the reason for that is that at the state bank level, who monitors, they too understand that because of the crowding out, there is not much risk that they can put in or not much capital they can divert to SMEs. It's sad. Then on the other side, there is the pressure on the government to reduce any subsidies that are available or perhaps are needed at some stage to kickstart the financing. So that's going away under the IMF program. And finally, when you look at the implementation of IFRS 9 as an accounting standard, that is going to, and it's going to start from this year onwards for NBFCs, that is going to start defining risk in a very different manner as to what SECP or State Bank of Pakistan does, and the capital requirement is going to change. So while that is absorbed, I think there is a lot of thinking and restructuring or the approach towards SME financing that is going to change. And from a lender perspective, I think the only way to say it is that more impact investors are needed. There is more soul searching that the banks need to do. And hopefully, with the policy rate coming down, the banks will also start looking at higher margin SME financing, which might help it.
Javed sir.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just building on to what Naveed Sahab has said, uh, while the regulator has been pushing the financial institutions to increase these SMEs, but I think work needs to be beside the policies that Naveed Sahab mentioned. So I would take a couple of more points. The work needs to be done from the government level or the regulators along with the financial institutions in terms of capacity building for the SME bankers. So if we do not really understand the SME's problem and using the same cookie cutter we try to increase the number, that will not happen. That's the reason that probably that number is very stagnant in terms of rupees disbursed as well as the SMEs who has access to finance around 200,000 rupees, 200,000 SMEs. So that is clearly an area that probably collectively at some intervention from the government level is required. I think then another area is that while the taxation and IFRS is there, we need to reduce the documentation, regulatory documentation for the SMEs, especially now that inclusion is the topic, and we have seen a lot of data available in terms of various payment platforms and everything. So when you want to do a digital lending and still some regulator asks you to get a signed paper from the SMEs or the borrowers, that really defeats the purpose of the digital lending and the decision making, but because that puts you back to the normal conventional way
Banda
where
bhejna padega,
banda
bande ko aana
bhejenge, you
padega.
will sit across and that will delay the process. So I think there are these type of things which I must appreciate the regulators as well. The central bank which regulates the banks, SCCP that regulates the NBA lending, NBFIs, they're very welcoming and very open to discussion, but obviously at their level also it takes time to change the policies and stuff like that. So hopefully these type of interventions will definitely help SMEs to get these loans very faster.
Right. So we've talked a lot about, how on the supply side, things can be improved, or, what are the changes that are being made, and, what are the things that we're doing differently as a specialized SME financier. Is there anything that you'd like to touch upon, on the demand side? What do the SMEs need to do better? So one of the things I think that came out in the conversation that we were having on, why they're going to, non-banks and why they're going to the informal sector was that, they also need to plan better. Yes, of course, there are shocks that they may not be able to plan for, but sensitivity analyses and things like that. So that's one of the things, Javed साहब, जो आपने कही. इसके अलावा आप लोगों को क्या लगता है कि on the SME side, because I know आप बहुत ज़्यादा SMEs के साथ interact करते हैं, and I know, Naveed, in your role also, there's a lot of interaction. So what can SMEs do better to be more eligible candidates for finance, I think?
I think it's a two-way street. Clearly, banks need to understand SMEs' supply side way. But on the demand side, SMEs also need to make an effort to understand what are the facilities available to them. It's a two-way street. The banks need to participate and help them do it, but at the same time, the SMEs need to get over their mental block over coming into the formal sector or looking into documenting themselves a bit better, because that crowds out so many SMEs. So, like I said, to me, I think it's a two-way street at all levels. The policymakers, the regulators need to reach out to them, but also, so therefore, the fear of the SMEs coming into the tax net or into the regulated space goes away. That is going to help. Now, for the banks to do that, yes, they can make certain inroads, but it is ultimately a combined effort of both the SMEs and the suppliers of capital, along with the regulators.
So essentially better documentation is what you're saying, and then
Yeah.
better being more forthcoming. So understanding
Yeah.
that an access to finance bridge, or access to finance will help them grow so much that the tax implication will not be material.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
so
That's one of the things that we've noticed, that SMEs do not understand that even after coming in the documented space, the tax implications are not very different
yeah,
from what they're paying.
especially if they can go to scale with the amount
Yeah.
of money that they can now put into the system. जावेद साहब, आपको क्या लगता है
Yeah.
कि SMEs को क्या चीज़ बेहतर करने की ज़रूरत है? क्योंकि हम हर वक्त अकाउंटेबल आप लोगों को ही ठहराते रहते हैं ना, SMEs को भी थोड़ा सा हम पूछें कि भाई वो क्या चीज़ बेहतर कर सकते हैं.
वेल देखिए, आई थिंक अकाउंटेबल ठहराना जायज़ है, एंड नवीद साहब ने, आई एग्री टू ऑल ऑफ हिज सजेशंस, बट लेट मी टेल यू दैट दिस SMEs won't change. Right? Because overall, if you look at the entire country, this is not only the SMEs. So the people, the fear of coming into the tax net, the fear of declaring the right documents, ये नहीं जाएगा. And we just can't tell them, because होता यह है कि these SMEs ये मेरे लिए आके नहीं करेगा कि मैंने उसको पैसे देने हैं, because informal sectors and the various other things, वहाँ से उसको सारी चीज़ें अवेलेबल हैं और वो कर भी रहे हैं. जो थोड़े से बेहतर हो जाते हैं, ग्रो हो गए हैं, एस्टेब्लिश हो गए हैं, वो आई थिंक दे हैव रियलाइज्ड, और उन्होंने ये सारी चीज़ें अपनी टैक्स प्रैक्टिसेस, डॉक्यूमेंटेशन बेहतर कर ली है, एंड दे आर नाउ बैंकेबल टू द बैंक्स एज वेल. प्रॉब्लम उन मिलियंस ऑफ SMEs का है जिनके पास शायद आज हम तो कह रहे हैं कि जी आप कंपनी बना लें, आप HCCP को रेगुलर रिटर्न्स दें, चीज़ें दें. अनफॉर्चुनेटली देयर इज़ ओनली अ वन मैन शो. वो सुबह से शाम तक अपना काम करता है, तो दे नॉट इन अ पोजीशन टुडे कि वो 2-4 लोग हायर कर लें जो उनकी बुक कीपिंग करें, चीज़ें करें. सो वाइल इट्स गुड टू हैव, बट आई विल स्टिल, आई थिंक मेरा जो SMEs के लिए एक मैसेज है कि प्लीज़ आप फेयर फैक्टर निकाल दें. आपको बग़ैर इस तरह के सोफिस्टिकेटेड डॉक्यूमेंट्स के भी कहीं ना कहीं से माइक्रो फाइनेंस से एंटिटीज़ हैं, उनके पास भी डिजिटल स्कोरिंग है, या परवाज़ जैसे आज हम कह रहे हैं कि आपको कोलेट्रल के बग़ैर, आपको बहुत ज़्यादा सोफिस्टिकेटेड ऑडिटेड डॉक्यूमेंट्स के बग़ैर पैसे मिल सकते हैं. बहुत सारे बैंक्स में भी मैं जानता हूँ जहाँ पे इस तरह की चीज़ें होना शुरू हो गई हैं, जहाँ पे लोगों ने कुछ पोर्टफोलियोज़ विद डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ यूजिंग AI एंड डेटा, वो ये काम करना शुरू हो गए हैं. सो नाउ SMEs को बग़ैर किसी डॉक्यूमेंट्स के भी बैंक्स को बताना चाहिए कि ये वो रेगुलर काम है जो वो करते हैं, एंड आई थिंक बैंक्स उनको सपोर्ट कर भी रहे हैं, इनफॉर्मल सेक्टर भी कर रहा है, नॉन बैंकिंग कंपनीज भी कर रही हैं. सो दे मस्ट अपना वो फियर फैक्टर निकाल के और फॉर्मल सिस्टम को अप्रोच करना चाहिए. आज का चैलेंज ये है कि वो अप्रोच ही नहीं कर रहे हैं.
इसमें ज़रा एक और चीज़ है, एंड अगेन स्पीकिंग फ्रॉम द पेरेंट ऑफ प्रवास, करंदाज पर्सपेक्टिव, एक बहुत बड़ा एलिमेंट है कि करंदाज काम कर रहा है विद SCCP फॉर डिजिटाइजेशन of their processes, so the filing of paperwork, the looking of getting approvals from there, the time of that is shortening, transparency increase हो रही है. दूसरा project है FBR के साथ digitization का. That is going to have benefits as well, and we don't know all the benefits yet, but it is clearly going to improve the ecosystem.
It's going to push it in the right direction.
तो वो इकोसिस्टम जो है, देर इज़ एन इम्प्रूवमेंट एंड अ डायरेक्शन दैट इट्स हेडिंग इन विच इज़ पॉजिटिव. कितनी देर लगेगी इन दिस हैपनिंग, वी डू नॉट नो, बट दीज आर वेरी बिग स्ट्राइड्स दैट आर नॉट विजिबल येट. So hopefully it is all three things, regulator की आसानी.
One of the things I've heard is also on governance, जो आपने थोड़ी सी mention की कि one man show होता है. So a lot of the times financiers are like ये succession नहीं है, corporate governance नहीं है. उसके बारे में आप लोगों का क्या ख्याल है कि SMEs के ऊपर जो level of governance है, whether it's from a board or whether it's in terms of just succession for the CEO,
देखिए उसमें अगेन टॉकिंग फ्रॉम टेकिंग अ स्टेप बैक एंड पिकिंग अप, जावेद ने कहा कि SMEs का फियर फैक्टर और चेंज थोड़ा स्लो होगा. आप अगर US में जाएं तो वहाँ पे देर आर दीज एंटिटीज़ लाइक H&R Block जो कि स्मॉल बिजनेसेस के लिए डायरेक्टेड हैं. ठीक है, वो जो हैं एक स्टैंडर्डाइज रिपोर्टिंग और एक आउटसोर्स प्रोवाइड करती हैं ऑफ जस्ट वन एलिमेंट. Then there will be eventually outsourced entities that will be available at a very cheap rate, that some of the mid-sized M nahi but large S or M entities SME में they'll be able to engage. तो ये जो हैं changes आएंगे. Getting them incorporated, 5 million entities eventually can be a good target, but the bankable ones out of those, which are around 1.5 million or so, those are the ones one should target and see कि उनको किस तरह से इसमें लाया जा सकता है.
So thank you Zainab. I think बहुत important सवाल आपने पूछा है. Well, on document हमें इस तरह की सक्सेशन और चीज़ें नहीं मिलती, but as we said that ये छोटे छोटे SMEs हैं, इन्होंने probably the entire family's capital is in that business. So हम एज अ बैंक जब ये कहेंगे कि जाओ मुझे फॉर्म ए दे दो, फॉर्म 29 दे दो, डायरेक्टर्स की रिपोर्ट दे दो, वो नहीं मिलता है. इवन वन मैन शो ऑन पेपर है, बिकॉज प्रॉब्ली इट्स अ प्रोप्राइटरशिप कंपनी, एक ही पर्सनल नाम से बैंक अकाउंट भी खोला हुआ है. बट यू इफ़ रियली मीट देम एंड डिस्कस, सो प्रॉब्ली अगर वो कोई 2 भाई हैं या 3 भाई हैं, वन और द अदर वे दे आर इंगेज्ड इन द बिजनेस. And as I said, that its entire probably the family's capital is that business, and that's their bread and butter. तो वो informal succession already in place होती है. अब we have that probably mind block कि नहीं जी कागज़ पे नहीं लिखा हुआ तो नहीं है.
समझ आ गई. सो हमारा नौयत जिस तरीके से हम उसको देख रहे हैं, वो भी एज बैंकर्स और एज फाइनेंसर्स हमें चेंज करने की ज़रूरत है.
तो वो हमें ये सारी चीज़ें करेंगे तो आई थिंक
इट्स अ वेरी बैंकर्स पर्सपेक्टिव, राइट, इन टर्म्स ऑफ कि क्या फॉर्म, कौन सा फॉर्म फाइल्ड है, कौन सा फॉर्म फाइल नहीं है. Great. Acha, so this was a very, very fascinating conversation. Thank you so much to both of you for your time. I'm sure our audience learned quite a bit about it, not just about PFSL, but as SME owners, PFSL is an avenue that you should approach for access to finance. And then, what are the things that as SME owners can be improved on your end? We had a bit of a conversation on that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming from Lahore for this podcast. And thank you so much, Naveed, for your time. It was lovely having this conversation. And I will hold you accountable to the 6 months later podcast on the specifics that we want to kind of, go into. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you very much. We'll be there, inshallah.